As modern game design has pushed more and more towards live service, as well as some titles where, oh, we ran out of budget, so we had to ship the game as is, and we just have to hope that players actually invest in our game despite the fact that it's incomplete. So for me, I feel like one of the big reasons why I really like the visual novel medium is that majority of titles are these fully expansive worlds and stories to where by the time that you end up finishing a visual novel, you'll feel fully satisfied because you saw the story through to completion. But I have noticed that we're starting to see maybe more and more visual novels kind of take up this approach of incompleteness and maybe splitting their games up into multiple different applications, or maybe just taking long hiatuses in between putting out new bits of story. And so today I kind of want to touch upon both the negatives and the positives, I feel like, for me, as far as these quote-unquote incomplete or episodic visual novels. So let's get into it. Looking back, I want to say an example of a successful episodic visual novel would be through Higurashi. There's a multitude of different chapters, and each and every single chapter was its own dedicated game. And I want to say maybe it was in part due to the fact that it was like a different time back then, but I feel like there was less incentive to go ahead and do a visual novel in that sort of episodic format based off of monetary incentive. Right. Higurashi, I feel like, was undoubtedly a title that was made through passion and was made in that kind of episodic format because of just the grassroots of it and how it was this story that evolved as more and more people read it and people were able to become excited and think about, oh, where's the story going to go from here? People trying to piece together the mystery surrounding the story of Higurashi and how that kind of shaped as Higurashi was written for the following installments. So I feel like Higurashi is a title that I would not say that people are pretty angry about the fact that it was episodic. In a way too, I actually think it's really good that nowadays, if you're going to go ahead and dive into the story of Higurashi, the first chapter of Higurashi is entirely free, which means that you're able to, without any sort of barrier to entry, you're able to get in and experience the story and see if it's something that you like. So that way, if it is something that you like, then you would feel perfectly comfortable with spending money to purchase following chapters, either one at a time or all in bulk now that the whole story is complete. Now, another example that I've really harped on, I feel like, over the course of multiple different videos that I unfortunately need to bring up once again is Tsukihime Remake, which is a remake of the original Tsukihime. And I do think, in a way, I've kind of been burned by how they decided to go ahead and implement it. And I think in a way too, I've seen more and more Type Moon fans that are a little bitter over the fact that it is an incomplete story. I do think as far as completion wise and making you feel satisfied by the time that you've read all of Remake, it does a solid enough job to where it has 2 routes, it's capped off properly for both routes. And I would say that there isn't any sort of cliffhangers or anything that would maybe anger people that paid full price for the game and got to the end and felt like, oh, this isn't complete. But I think in the same way, the fact of knowing that it is a story that has already been complete and that you're waiting years and years and years for the continuation. And it's kind of like what I mentioned earlier where maybe there is a monetary incentive for them to divide the game into multiple parts so that way you are getting more money out of people. I think what's going to be kind of sad is that for myself, I haven't read the original Tsukihime, but from what I know, there is a decent amount of routes in that game. 2 routes available in Remake as of current, right? And I think maybe 2 or 3 years from now when we hopefully get Red Garden, what's going to suck too is if that drops and then maybe that's only 2 more routes for the maids within the story of Tsukihime. And then you end up waiting another 5 years for Akiha route and the high school friend, which I don't even know. She was I feel like she was pretty prevalently advertised in Tsukihime Remake for the OP. If you bought the physical edition, you got the art book and there's a whole bunch of stuff built around this one character that I don't remember her name for. And she's apparently quite important, had maybe only a couple of scenes in Remake, and I would not be surprised if, within Tsukihime Remake, they end up splitting it to where there's a second and then maybe even a third part to where you're going to be waiting upwards of a decade in order to read all of Tsukihime Remake when the original Tsukihime was all one complete game. So I think in that way, maybe that's a negative to where I would say, yeah, you can have a solid amount of enjoyment from reading what is available within one of those titles, but as somebody having the knowledge that it is a remake and it's based around something that was originally complete, it does kind of hurt. And then like another way of what I already mentioned of maybe cliffhangering people is that I had read the original Summer Pockets, and at that time I already knew that there was going to be an enhanced version by the title of Reflection Blue, but I had confidence that Key was going to actually go ahead and wrap things up in a neat way to where by the time that I would finish Summer Pockets base game that I was going to hopefully feel pretty satisfied. And I think the base game of Summer Pockets is quite solid, but I almost feel like they kind of threw everything away at the last minute, because by the time you get to the end of Summer Pockets, I don't really want to spoil as far as like what happens in that story towards the end of the game, but they kind of give you a bad ending and they leave you on a cliffhanger purposefully and almost like try to take away any sort of like gratification you would have had from completing all of the different routes throughout the base game of Summer Pockets. It make it feel like you almost wasted your time in a way. And I was pretty irritated by that fact by the time that I had finished Summer Pockets, to where, same thing, I felt like they were purposefully leaving the game open, giving you a cliffhanger to be like, oh hey, yeah, stick around in a couple of years from now, we're going to give you the full experience and we're going to expect for you to pay for it again. And that was something that was just like really irritated me. The reason why I had jumped into Summer Pockets was also because I had read a different visual novel that was also incomplete, but I feel like that visual novel actually wrapped things up quite well, and I felt like that was going to be maybe more of the standard. And maybe in a way it is, but Summer Pockets ended up being an outlier for me. The visual novel that I had read that I felt was wrapped up quite nicely was My Tetsu. My Tetsu has its own enhanced edition or like complete version that isn't translated, and I almost feel like that version isn't going to be ever translated. But I think in a way, if people want to pick up My Tetsu today and read the English translated version of My Tetsu, I feel like that's not actually that bad of an idea, because I would say that it wraps up all of its routes quite nicely. And then also, since I have played both versions, I actually kind of appreciate that within the localized version of My Tetsu and the quote-unquote incomplete version of My Tetsu, it has its own unique true ending sequence, to where the true ending within the complete version of My Tetsu is vastly different and feels very more like story oriented. The translated and incomplete version of My Tetsu, its true route is like a jokey kind of harem route styled story, but I think in a way it leaves you off on a pretty like fun note, to where you finish that story and you're not going to be like thinking about in the back of your mind, oh, you know, I really wish I was reading the complete version. You're able to kind of have this sort of like exclusive content available only to the base version that was made, with the knowledge that the people making that game were going to be making a complete version, but they wanted to give people that were there from the beginning something to have for themselves and really enjoy and read. And I feel like, yeah, the reason why I had read Summer Pockets base game was because I had read the base game of My Tetsu and had felt pretty satisfied with that sort of conclusion in a story, despite the fact that it was incomplete. Now, lastly, I guess I want to talk about two different examples, one very briefly and then one in greater detail. So recently, I had finally gotten around to picking up a free visual novel that is actually a fan game as well, but it is available on Steam, being Kemono Friends Opening Day. And that is a fan game that is in that episodic style as Higurashi, but I think is also a little different in that it is all one game application. So as every update comes out, there is just new chapters that are added on to the story that already exists. As far as like a monetized version of that, I believe The Coffin of Andy and Laylee, which is a pretty popular visual novel, at least like recently was, kind of does that same thing, to where it is you buy it one time and then as that game continuously gets updated, it just gets added on to the application that you already own. So that way you don't have to like split up all of the different like chapters and feel like, oh, I got like 10 different installs of the story, and to where it feels very divided. I think in a way Kemono Friends Opening Day was the only reason why I was really willing to like play that, was because of the fact that that is free. And since I already have some of those like negative connotations towards incomplete visual novels, I was almost expecting to just never read that until it was complete. But as I've been waiting for a brand new visual novel to drop, hopefully sometime this month, as of the time that I'm recording this, I figured I had some free time to play some shorter visual novels, and I decided, you know what, I'll go ahead and pick up Kemono Friends Opening Day and read it, and it should only be a couple hours, and hopefully it'd be a fun time, and I ended up having a really fun time reading Kemono Friends Opening Day. There are 3 chapters as of current, and each and every single chapter was like a little over an hour in read time for myself, and I was really happy with the overall like quality in the artwork and the music, and then also story. Surprisingly, despite the fact that it's a fan game, I feel like there was a lot of care and attention given to the writing for all of the characters, and I feel like Kemono Friends as a series is like a pretty like chill, laid back, and almost just kind of like heartwarming series where you're able to just experience things in like, I would say maybe a lesser level of attention or something like that, if you understand what I mean, to where the fact of like within the story of Kemono Friends, a lot of the characters aren't human, they are personifications of animals. And I think in a way that kind of like dumbs down the emotional weight of the characters, where within the story, talking with these characters feels a little bit more intimate because you're kind of like taking away a lot of the intricacy of like human conversations, I guess, in a way, if that makes sense, and make it to where within each and every single chapter, as the story progresses, you'll have some sort of like deeper emotional moment with one of the characters that I think can get resolved quite quickly, but ends up like being quite emotional and almost like a little bit of like a tearjerker in a way, to where I really did enjoy the story of Kemono Friends Opening Day. And now I can kind of see where, hey, maybe the episodic or like chapter style of visual novel releases is maybe not exactly always going to be a bad thing, right? I have like a couple months until I'm hopefully going to get the next update for chapter 4. But then after that, it's going to be probably a year-long wait for chapter 5. And it is kind of saddening to think about it that way, but at the same time, you know what? At least I'll have something to look forward to in the future. And that's something that excites me, as far as like having something I really enjoyed reading and being able to have more of it in the future to come. Those are my thoughts on both the positive and negatives of incomplete visual novel releases. I've been Wave. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.